So this is tips for improving your PowerPoint use. What I thought we would cover is the skills around how do I create it, how do I create layouts that work, and how do I control PowerPoint, or what else can I do to make me a little bit faster. So that's a sort of theme of the different sections that we'll go through. I'm going to start with how do I create it, and the focus here is really around making and editing shapes. Many of you know my background's graphic design, and in my first week when I was given a PC and told I was working in PowerPoint, I did feel like finding a corner, curling up, and thought you were all mad. However, you can build so many things in PowerPoint, and my journey in the last year and a half has just shown the potential of the software, and it's just not as restrictive as I originally thought. In fact, I now favour coming to PowerPoint. I think probably my old classmates would be shuddering when I'm saying this, saying, you know, you can do so much. So these example slides that I've got up here have been built in PowerPoint. The icons here probably dropped in from Noun Project or somewhere like that, but all of these elements, the boxes, the lines, the directions, the shadows, they are all coming from construction inside PowerPoint. So this is not about teaching you graphic design. It's saying you can do this stuff with the stuff that you've got inside there. So what I thought we'd do is run through a little bit of, in particular, and to show, I'm selecting it on screen, and I might even ungroup it for you, if I can. Nope, it's not going to let me. That image completely created in PowerPoint. So how did we do that? To start with, we'll look at the freeform shape tool. So the chicken on a stick, as it's affectionately known, has been created with the freeform shape tool. You'll find the tool under the shapes pop-out. It looks a little bit like a funny shaped square. When you're using it, if you click, you're going to get straight lines. So you can set up the shape really quickly, connect it back up, job done. Pretty good. The other thing to know about this tool as well is that it doesn't do just straight lines, it also does curved lines. So I've got a few straight lines, and then if I click and drag, I can start to create the crazy shapes that I might want to. Pretty cool. Related to being able to draw your own freeform shapes, you might then want to get in and start editing something that hasn't gone quite right, or use an existing shape that you've put in and edit it to something that you'd like it to be. So to do that, we need to get to the edit points. Up until Nicole showed me a few minutes ago, I've normally been coming through into the shape format. When you have a shape selected, the format tab will show up, and popping out to the side here to track down the change shapes and edit points. However, right-clicking gets you right there, so thank you for that tip. Edit points. That'll bring up the nodes and the handles related to what is creating that shape. So the nodes being the black things in the middle, and the handles coming out the side. So you can manipulate how that might end up looking, moving it around, and changing the handles. The other thing that you can do, again with the right click exactly on top of a point, is you can delete the point. And I'm going to do one more thing with these shapes when I can select them correctly. Bring it over here. You can quickly stylize these shapes, and I'll probably touch on this a couple of times, but if I grab the Format Paint tool, you can see that I've already been able to quite quickly create that person shape using an ellipse and a circle. The last thing that I'll show you with the edit points, now I'm zooming in on my screen, and I'm doing that because there's a shape selected, and on a Mac it's Command and plus. You can zoom right in on the place that you want to have a look at. And I'm going to go in again to the edit points and take them in a little bit. And so you can see I've now got the shape that would start to form that chicken in the stick, and done pretty quickly. Okay, so if you zoom back out, so freeform shapes and edit points. How did I duplicate that so quickly? When you've got a shape and you want to make another one of them really quickly, holding down on a Mac, it's Control. I'm not sure what it is on a PC.
Control Shift.
Control Shift. Drag it across. So the shift is actually the thing that's constraining where and how you move it. If you hold down Shift, it's either going to go horizontally or vertically. The Control or Control Shift will make the duplication. So getting that shape, and you can make many of them really quickly. So for example, again, if we zoom on in here, take that, move it across, move it across. If I bring this in a little closer, this would have also been made by taking one of the original lighter coloured rectangles, the same approach to build them up. And this is something that I will show where to track down and how to do this, but I'm quickly doing a spacing of the objects. And all of a sudden, the building is looking as though it's got windows. And the last part, while I am zoomed in there, I'm going to take this and make a duplicate of it. But we've only got R1, we need R2 now. That's a reference to the Russell buildings. And to be able to do that, I need to come into find the arrange, for me through drawing and arrange and rotate and flip horizontally. And now we've got the other side of the building built in no time, and we're done. Pretty cool. When you've got a shape selected, if you want to have a little bit more control around moving it, as I said, so holding down the Shift will mean that it will go vertically or horizontally exactly, which is really nice for keeping things aligned. Another thing to do with that is if you have the Control or the Alt key and you press an arrow key, it's going to move it by exactly a pixel. So those people that are working with process maps that have only a limited amount of space or certain things like that, having the Shift key down as you're moving, that's not quite working. I must have selected that wrong. We'll then move it in certain increments. What we found before when we were mucking around was that if you hold on the Mac, an Option key, and then press an arrow, it actually does incremental rotation as well. That's the second tip that I've learned for the day. So that's quite a cool thing to know about. And there was one last thing just related to the building shapes that we've built. So that's around merge shapes. So I'm again going to zoom in on this little area here. I've got a shape selected, so the shape formatting shows up. And out to the side here, there's the chain shape. I need to have two shapes selected, and the second drop down around being able to merge shapes together shows up. You've got heaps of options in here, and so this is really good not only for creating combination shapes, but also creating fragments. So when you need to, for example, do a Venn diagram and you need the intersection between two circles or three circles, it's a nice way of being able to create that. So if I do a union here, I've now got the building. I've got one more tip to do with that though, because this building's turned orange. The order that you select the shapes in will define what the final colour is of the object once you've merged it together. So this time I've selected the blue shape and then the orange shape, so I'm done. I don't need to go back in and then recolour that shape. Okay. Lining stuff up, aka how to not avoid making designers cry. I don't know if that sentence is the right way around or not. I was tired last night when I was building this. So we've got the duplication that we've done of shapes, but then how do we make sure everything lines up really quickly? And that's to do with the format and align. This is where you could find it, and so using the align, we're snapping horizontally or vertically a series of shapes. And then as far as getting them laid out, it could be around using the distribute horizontally so that all of the shapes are evenly spaced, and likewise for the vertical. So if I do that, I'll do a quick bottom align on those ones. Same thing here, come into here and do a distribute horizontally. I am coming to this, but I've got all of these loaded up in here. This is something that I do all the time. It's how I make things look the way I do. It's by using alignments and an understanding of grids and lines and references. I would note that a lot of this content that's been built has been done by Hannah. And this is actually a little nod to Hannah, because I wouldn't use the word fugly, but I know that she does. and this is something that she's been trying to push and encourage as well. And it says there, one side looks beautiful, the other side just isn't comfortable and right. And sometimes that's what you want. You want some tension in your design to make it look a little bit provocative, or for whatever reason. This is not a right wrong. This is just saying, if you want to know how things can be more beautiful, think about lining things up and using those tools to do that. Thank you, Hannah. Okay, some other tips quickly around shapes. So you've created a slide and your client says, really don't like the circles. The circles just are not working for me whatsoever. No problem, shape format, change shape. Would you prefer for them to all be, let's say, quotes? Done. Move on. To do with working with text boxes. So the templates, the TP templates have been set up that if you use the text box tool to create a new text box, a draw text box, you'll have a clean box with no margins. If you copy and paste something in, you are going to end up with a text box with margins. And if you're using a shape, either you've made it or haven't made it, I can't remember. It may end up having margins or not. But this is about how to get control over those. And particularly related to, I've seen a lot of people building a shape and then putting text in a box over top of that shape. And it's just not efficient, and it's probably not complementary to accessible design, because you're going to end up with so many shapes. What you're wanting is control, so let me show you how to get a little bit of control. I've got this text box here. I'm going to actually quickly, what do I need to turn on? My ruler. Turn the rulers on. And I come into this text box. You can see up the top here, the ruler is starting to show where some of the text is. And if I drag across, you can have a hanging indent or line everything up and start to get control as to where that text starts. The other thing I'd show you though is you can get into much more detail than that. So in the format pane is where I tend to head to when I've got some text selected and I really want to have some control over where it's sitting within the box. And this is where I'm saying the template starts with 0, but if we put in 0.5, it starts to say from the left margin, the top, the bottom, where do you want this text to be? The last little thing that I'd note to do with that is you can align the text within the shape to be top, middle, or bottom. And so that'll give you now the ultimate control, and I will be keeping an eye. Has anyone got floating text boxes? You'll now be able to position it top, middle, bottom, left, right, exactly where you want it to be using those tips. Another shape tip, I'm not sure if you've had this happen on diagrams where you've been trying to make some connection to something and PowerPoint thinks that it's quite smart and it tries to give you a suggestion as to where you want that arrow to end up, and it can kind of snap into it magnetically nearly. Holding down the Option key or the Control key takes that away, so then you'll be able to place exactly where you want it to be. And another handy tip that Nicole pointed out is if you actually know exactly where on the outside of a shape you want that arrow line to connect to, you know how to edit points. So you can actually add a point exactly where you want it to be and then have that snap into it. Now, as I mentioned, I have all of my toolbars set up at the top, and this is around using the customization of your quick access toolbar. Right up on the toolbar, there's a tiny kind of pop-out Customize Quick Access Toolbar button. And you can come into the More commands and think about what it is that you use all the time and you're having to dive in through menu systems to get. You can choose from popular commands, or if you know, I know it's on the Home tab somewhere, coming into there and then choosing. So as you'll see, I've just dragged these across. I want always to be using align, so all of the aligns are set up and then just appear up in that top menu bar up here. Okay. that was my whirlwind tour of shapes, and now I'm going to look at layouts. So how do we create great layouts that work? And the answer is using table, using background graphics, and using grids. So again, reached out and got some examples of some really great work. And in these ones, this is use of tables as a holder of information. The great thing about tables is that you can then have really good control of quickly being able to get in and influence whole columns, whole rows, applying the colours, applying the styles in one hit. So it speeds things up rather than having to use a paint tool to kind of wrap one style of a text to another, or selecting multiple boxes and then do it. Tables, put them in the background and use them. So these are a couple of really good examples of that. I was going to add a page in here just to talk a little bit about the TP template and what it does, and the reason I do that is to do with this slide here. You can see there's like a repeating pattern of what's going on with rows in particular. So the TP templates, I'm going to insert a table, and it automatically comes in with a preferred TP style. So this is one that's been designed when we set up the templates. And it's these checkboxes up here that start to influence what's going on, which rows are highlighted, which ones are of a certain colour. So I would encourage you thinking about, when you're using a table, what's the best starting point? Am I going to be using rows? Am I going to be using columns? Get those ones sorted before then coming in and doing some of the customization, what you can see on the right-hand side. So yeah, the first few columns and rows underneath have been sorted, but then just need to tweak the last side. Here's an example that shows another use of tables, and it's not so much for the containing of text information, but to start to use it as a visual device or a visual tool. In this instance, it was within a proposal and trying to kind of show a bit of a heat map of capability. So just a table and then different colours put into different spaces to show that, hey, the team's got it all. So like I said, another way to start to think about creating a really good layout is to start to think about what the background image is and using that as a way of containing the information. I'd encourage you to always have a really good think about an idea or something like something that makes sense. And this, setting targets and having a way to travel and knowing that there's going to be a high ground and a low ground to start to build up what that background graphic is. This one I don't think was built in PowerPoint, but there's absolutely no reason why it could not have been. And just to show you how to make it a little bit easier to work with, making sure that some of the background information is through in your master slides. So creating a new slide in the master slides, putting the background graphic in there. The reason I think some of the graphic designers are nodding in the room is because this is layers within Illustrator and Photoshop, and something that I know I battled with to start with. So being able to at least have two levels of, I can put this in, I can lock it, and then I can work on the content that's through on the main slide. So here's a couple where the background image has been brought into a master slide, and the content hovering over the top. So yeah, some pretty cool use of that. Wanted to show a couple of examples to say, yes, it was built in PowerPoint, and start to think a little bit towards that layout of using a grid. So we do have the TP grid, which I'm sure you know and love and use all the time. But to build on from that, the grid is around that alignment. And so you can actually see within this, the grid structure has been set up and manipulated. It's not the same structure as the TP one, but there's been some careful thinking. This is a 5-column grid, and the lines are used further down in the bottom text in the way that's been laid out. So if there was 12 of these to do, designing the first one, getting it good to go, and then probably setting up the grid by dragging in some of the guidelines. If we can find a place. So dragging guides, having them showing, and putting them to where you need them to be on a particular page. And then as you're building up the other shapes, because you're bound to kind of move things around, you'll have that your ability to snap back in and use the grid. Okay, I've got a couple of examples. I might actually pop through a little bit, just conscious of time. And I thought this was a fantastic example of thinking about what the background looks like to set up and design a series of posters. And they look pretty exciting when they are individually laid out. I also note that I'll point this out a bit later when we're doing sampling colours, so I know why there's a little collection of colours sitting out to the side, but 5 pretty good posters. But then when you zoom in and start to have a look, the fun stuff starts to happen, because each of these, if we were to line up, has got a flow going on from one page to the next. So really clever idea, probably a lot of work to be able to get it lined up, but as I say, works to end up having a really, really great piece to hold the information that we want to display. Wanted to show a little bit more about potentially that use of slide masters. And so this is a series of process maps, and this would be a great example if these were duplicated and you had to do 5 or 6 of the same thing, by having the content that's in grey here sitting in a series of master slides. You bring the content that's over the top for this particular theme, this particular topic, lay it all out, and then have the slide masters ready to go for the other focuses, the other themes, the other iterations. And look, I thought this was just a really great example of, there's actually a heap of information, but it has been pulled in and turned into a one-pager. Great use of the lines, the dividing, laying it out, thinking what is important, pulling some boxes, some colours. And I also learnt a little bit about smart art when I had a look at this, something that I hadn't used. So this is the tip off this one. Smart art giving you the flexibility to have a whole bunch of different shapes, have some control over it, put the information in, and then not have to worry about, have I got those 2 things perfectly lined up, or have I moved one of the shapes? Okay, so moving on. What else can I do to make me faster? You thought that was a lot, there is more. Just a little note around using columns. So instead of having 2 different text boxes, having one text box that uses the column feature to split that text up, which means that then as you're editing, you don't have to constantly copy and paste between the 2 different boxes to get that right. I know Janine's going to shudder a little bit when she sees this, and the reason she's going to shudder is it doesn't look anything like how she designed it. So whoa, I've pasted from another PowerPoint and it's all gone crazy. So the colour's gone crazy, the page number's gone crazy, it's just not working. So when you're bringing in content, really being quite aware of what are you choosing when you're bringing that content in. Are you using the source formatting, the formatting that's within the document that you're bringing it from? Are you using the destination formatting and theme, which is the one that you've set up? Or are you pasting as a picture? So in this instance here, when I've done the paste, I've done it as a PDF. So it's dropped it in as a complete unit, and we don't need to worry about it anymore. But I will quickly do the copy-paste example. So this was a slide deck with many slides. I've just retained this one here, and I'm going to do a copy on my machine, and then come through into the other slide deck. I've inserted in here the line, and I'm going to do the paste. And what I wanted to point out is the tiny little pop-out with paste options that shows up. Voila. On that note though, how has that happened and what's going on in the background? Oh, it hasn't happened this time. Oh no, it has, here we go. So here is the original slide master, and if I scroll down, I can now see that there is a whole bunch of other slide masters that it's brought in at the same time. So when you are bringing themes, content, slides in, and particularly if you're coming from a deck where the slide master had a lot of content and all of a sudden your slide file size is blown out, that might be one place to start looking and understand what's caused that to happen. Colours. So many people have heard for many, many times stay above the line, and I'm now going to stray from that and break all the rules and say, okay, so there is a project that we're doing for somebody else, for another client. They have asked for it to be in their style. How do we quickly get their colours and bring it in? Or how do we choose colours from another example that we really like? And to do that, the first thing I would encourage you is to go and actually find the corporate standards. Go and get that information and set up the colours by correctly choosing them. Alternately, you can use the eyedropper. So in this example here, this is just a square that's been placed in, and I want to get to colour. And there's a pop-out under the colour menu. See how far below the line we are? It's just, oh. And then there's an eyedropper tool, and I can sample the colour and then have that colour into use throughout the rest of the document. And you remember when I said when we were looking at the series of posters, there was a little swatch to the side? You'd set up your swatch, and then you'll be able to come back to that and sample swatches if you end up having a document, heaven forbid, that has so many colours in it that the recent colours have been blown out. That's an intelligent use of a little swatch in the background. Whew. Excellent. We've made it through the parts of me presenting to you guys. So now I'm going to hand it over to some of the queries and team tips that you might have. To start with, Nicole's just going to check in to see whether there's anyone on Zoom who's posted any questions for us to answer.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we've had Janine put in just on the PC formatting painting shortcut, Control-Shift-C or V, if you need to copy and paste. Question from Elliot is there any way to build grids and guidelines quickly, i.e. not one line at a time or auto distributions?
I think the top of my answer is no. So you're talking about when you've got a slide and you've got the guides on, and you're wanting to be able to manipulate them collectively. Not that I've found. It is literally moving them around incrementally and one at a time. I do have a tip to do with that though, when you're building up guides, being really conscious of where you're building them. So it takes a lot of time to do it, and you don't want them shifting around. So the location that you should do that is your master slides. Do it once, do it right. As I say, if you build the guides up within a slide, even though you're copying and pasting and getting that, you bump it around and it messes it up. So no, but there's another tip.
I've got another question from Katie, Janine and Katie, about costing in for making PowerPoints accessible. So it's something that's kind of come up recently. So Lee actually has a project where they needed the final PowerPoint artifacts to be accessible. And how did you manage that, Lee?
I don't think I did manage it particularly well. I think moving forward, when we're getting aware that a product is going to be delivered, that we need to start really putting that into the costing and maybe drawing on the experience of a few people, definitely you, Nicole, and others that have done this, to see how long does this actually take, and also probably gauging level. The project that we're working on is in PowerPoint, but is probably going to be used in-house, and I think the chances of using a reader on it is probably quite low, given the audience. So then it would be more around maybe more of the principles and some alternate text in a couple of places, maybe. Whereas, who is the intended audience of something that is going to be distributed more broadly, in which case a day of time to go through a 20-page slide deck might be good in the first instance. Do we need a day plus a day for testing? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, as to what level of accessibility the document needs to be. And I would say if you actually started thinking about how it would be accessible right from the start, that actually is quite, it shouldn't actually add that much more time to your build of the slide deck. So if you kind of just thought, all right, the first thing I want them to read is the title, I'll put the title in first and fill that in. Then I need like an arrow followed by text next to the arrow. If you kind of just build it in that order, generally the reading order will just kind of follow suit. And things like adding alt text, you saw it earlier, it's pretty simple to kind of just put something in for a small diagram. So I think the times when it would get really complicated is when you've got a very extensive page. So if we go back to the defense mountains with all the flags kind of coming up, the screen reader does read through everything. I tested it earlier, just that the slide or the actual reading order is a bit jumbled up. So you have a bit more things to just realign, but it shouldn't actually take too long if you did have to do it. Yeah.
Does it only read the text?
It does only read the text if you've got something highlighted as an image. So like with what I did with the diagram earlier for inclusive and technical accessibility, it will kind of read out, this is a diagram, I'm telling you what the alt text is for this diagram. So if you have it in that order, it'll just follow it. Yeah. And there's a comment here from Tim. Sometimes we use really complex visuals to communicate complex information, which can be very hard to make accessible. I'd also suggest considering ways of breaking things up into simpler steps, telling a story across multiple slides rather than all at once. I think this is a really good point. So maybe having something like this where it's a big at a glance kind of thing, but if the subsequent slides delve into some of the individual aspects a bit more, as long as the meaning is communicated, I think that's something that is quite positive for accessibility.
I'd put on that a little bit as well because some of the diagrams that we've built in the time that I've been here have been incredibly complex, but built for the right reason. They were quite beautiful and they were around really kind of showcasing that complexity. So the idea that would then need to be accessible probably wasn't right. They were posters, they were kind of showcase pieces. And so knowing whether it's that level that we're trying to get to, and therefore it's just not quite appropriate, and dropping maybe the visual in, but the alt text will be fine. But then really thinking at the other end of the scale, sometimes we try to overcomplicate things far too much, and really focusing on actually how can we simplify this down. The goal is that one page that resonates really quickly and easily with the right audience, and being confident to keep on trimming and trimming. I'm guilty as well. I start with way too much stuff when I do design, and then as I move through drafts, it will get cleaner and cleaner. So, yeah.
Cool. One other question from Katie is, when you bring videos over from YouTube, so if you embed them in PowerPoint, whether they still keep their closed captioning function. I haven't actually tested this. I was thinking more if you had a link that then went externally onto YouTube, so try and pick videos or platforms which have captioning available, but I will test this and get back to you. Yeah.
It does import.
It does? Oh, cool. So Abram just mentioned that it does import captions, so if you were to embed a video onto PowerPoint from YouTube, it'll have the captioning built in. For Mac users, this is from Danny. How to save as PDF without blowing up the size?
Great question. Thank you, Danny. And this is an example where it is a very large slide deck, as you can imagine. So the first thing is thinking about where the pictures are and have they been cropped and can you compress them. So if I take this one, and we use this crop tool all the time, I've noticed. So I've cropped that PDF that I've copied from another slide deck. I've pasted it in as a PDF, so it's now an image. When I click on it, I can tell it's an image because the picture format tab comes up. I've cropped it down, and over on here, inside the same picture format, there's a little pop-up button which goes to the compress pictures options. There is a number of options of picture quality, and sometimes you'll need to have 2 files, or sometimes you'll even have to have 3 files. You'll have to have the one that you're building, you'll have to have the one that you intend to have the best quality in, which may be used for print, and then you'll have the one that is the on-screen version, and possibly through into an email version if it's that big and you need to email it to a client. I've found that we've had pretty good success with this on-screen option for bringing the size of things down. And you'll see that there's a text box in there around deleting the cropped areas of pictures. And do you want to do it to one or all pictures at the same time? So that would be the first thing that I'd do to try and start to reduce file size.
We've got one from Scott. Do screen readers in PowerPoint have the ability to identify page structure, such as headings, bulleted sub-items, similar to how a screen reader works with a web browser? It's a really good question. The screen reader I've downloaded doesn't seem to have that kind of, where you can kind of open a keyboard and go to the different headings and just focus on those headings. When I tested it, it does seem to just read through everything in the reading order that you've set it up. I do wonder though that if I had a screen reader like JAWS, where it actually has that functionality built in, whether that would work. So again, something I will be testing out and I'll get back to you on that. Yeah. Question from Michael, or comment. Am I the only one that likes using sections for chapters and slide sorter when storyboarding large reports?
I would say no. And it sounds by the comments around the rest of the room, no. I use sections a lot, particularly when you've got multi-page documents, to be able to think about how to bring them together and have them grouped, and having styles sort of set up ready for that as well.
What slide sorter though?
One of the views. The view, slide sorter.
Oh,
So slide sorter?
Yeah. Yeah, do that.
So yeah, the question, what is slide sorter? Being able to look at it like this.
And sorry, what are you talking about with sections?
Yep, so sections, if I go back to a normal view, I'm just wondering what we do have in the master slides, but we'll find out. So sections, you can, maybe if you want to do this on screen as well. Wait, my brain catches up.
Sorry, can we backtrack?
So just if you hit put your mouse between the two pages, and sections is found on the home tab, and add sections.
Or you can right click.
Or you can right click. I'm learning so much. This is a new section. And then all of those slides are grouped together into a section. So that's a sort of functional thing that's happening in the background. To complement that, you may also have a slide that's set up, which is the section divider. I can't see one quickly. Oh, here we go. Section title, which is one that came through from the page that I copied and pasted in. So the combination of the functional, how it's set up within the numbers of slides, and then having a slide which divides up visually when you're going through a deck, the sections.
All right.
Elliot, you've got a question.
I've got a tip that I stumbled upon recently, and it's been super useful if you're working on really big slide decks and you need to not copy information across, but reference information while you're building a different slide. I don't know what it is on a Mac, but on a PC, if you hit Control-Shift-N, it'll open up a second instance of the same file. So, so Nicole's just done it
Cool.
up there. So
I think I've just made a new
you
document.
just opened a new file, but on the Microsoft version, you can see there's a little 1 up on the title slide now, and there should actually be a second file somewhere. I don't know where it is with the screen sharing that's going on. But then you can put one instance on a lower screen and a second instance on the top screen, and you can have them on different pages. And it'll simultaneously, it's the same file, so it doesn't matter which one you work on, it'll edit both.
Oh.
So it's super useful to work across multiple slides at the same time.
Okay.
That is cool. Yeah.
Just on that, if you're doing data and infographics, you can also link from Excel. So you can have your data in Excel, create a chart, copy and paste that chart into PowerPoint and continue editing there and keep your styles looking beautiful and your data up to date.
Just whilst we are sort of talking about plugins and things like that, and the one that Abraham kind of posted, in other companies, there's two plugins that are quite frequently used, which might also be useful, like for ThinkPlace possibly to look at. One of them is ThinkCell, and that actually is one that is really good with charts. So if we were to have to do more charts, which I don't think we necessarily always do, but if we do a lot of charts, ThinkCell is an amazing tool to create charts and link the data to Excel, and you can create waterfall charts and all kind of like cool stuff. And then the second one, which I've used quite a lot as well, but at the moment is still only available on PCs, although it's coming out on Mac, is called PPT Productivity, which is created by an ex-BCG guy. And it's got a couple of really awesome buttons in it. It creates a sort of a thing on the left-hand side with a whole bunch of buttons in there. And for example, you can select, two text boxes, for example, that you've created, and there's a button in there that just switches them around, for example. So, when you have to like reorder things and things like that, it's just absolutely amazing. It's got a whole bunch of sort of shortcuts in, which are usually a bit more hidden in the menus in terms of like left align or center align and things like that, and it's just very, very, very easy. Both of them come at a cost though, but they're two amazing tools. Also, for example, when you need to create a Gantt chart, the ThinkCell one is actually really useful. It creates little rows in there. You add a row and it all sits on the one page, and I don't think we are very good at creating Gantt charts for implementation plans, because it's all cool. They all look a bit different, or there's like an imported Excel which doesn't really look sexy at all.
Cool. So I think we'll head towards wrapping up. It's been quite a rapid and quite a full-on session. Thank you so much for all of your contributions towards that as well. I did want to again put you in the direction of the slide docs document. You can actually learn not only the content, but how it's been made in the background from it. So being able to open this up, have a read and learn all of the principles and how it's been done, but then go and have a look at the master slides. The master slides have been used to generate all of the layouts. So by spending a bit of time getting 20 slides ready to go, everything throughout the whole document has been able to be done by just importing the text and styling it. So it's a really fantastic read. Cannot encourage it enough. Hey, so thanks everyone for attending today, and we'll see you next time.